Good evening, and tonight we have a great show, and tonight's going to be about the Department of Corrections incarceration. But before we go there, I'd like to make a couple announcements. But again, call people because again, we have, I think, an all-star cast, and people are very respected in our community, and it's going to be a great show. It's going to be a lot of questions. So call some family members, call everybody, let them know what's going on. Again, my name is Julius Cephas. I'm president of the union at the Port of Wilmington, 1694-1. And we try to create jobs and we try to do a lot of things for the community. But tonight, the show will be dedicated to our veterans, past and present, men and women, who do a great job in sacrificing, put their life on the line for us to be free, for us to come in here, say some of the things that everybody might not agree with, but this is part of freedom. But again, also what I would like to say is that we want to bring you the problems, but we also want to bring you solutions. Everybody can point to problems, but do they have solutions? Are they willing to get out and work and try to make things happen? And that's what we're all about. And that's why, again, tonight, I'm privileged to come here in front of you, because of our union, 1694-1 at the Port of Wilmington, because we want to see great things happen. But tonight, I'd like to go to our panel. I'd like them to introduce themselves, and then we will start some questions. How you doing, Liz?
I'm fine.
Introduce yourself.
Elizabeth Allen. I'm with Citizens for the Greater Good, and I have a website called Delaware'sVoice.com.
Good evening, Julius. Thank you for having me. I'm Pastor Derek D. Johnson of the Joshua Harvest Church, formerly incarcerated and pardoned ex-offender.
And my name is Shirley White Ruffin, and I work in the Department of Correction in Pennsylvania. I work with dual diagnosed and drug and alcohol.
Okay, one of the things we want to talk about, when people do the time, we believe they should do the time. But in the meantime, while they're doing the time is where the process and the problems come in. And we want to address that tonight about the treatment, things that they're doing. Again, we're not for, if you're doing violent crimes, you should be in prison, you should serve your time and do what you're supposed to do. So we're not against that. But there's some issues that we have a problem with, some concerns with. And we'll start off, the first question is this. Talk about crack, cocaine. We talk about policy making first thing. And these are presidents who have created policy, I believe, against the people. What I'm saying is, we're gonna talk about crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, where there's a different time for as going to prison. Ronald Reagan started about the crack versus powder cocaine. Also, President Clinton was getting tough on crime. He started the 3 strikes you're out and you go to jail for life. And this was President Clinton. And I remember a judge who stepped down from the bench. He had a guy this is his 3rd strike. His 3rd strike was he stole a slice of pizza. And the judge refused to send this man to prison for life for something like that, and he resigned. So I would like to ask my panel, what do y'all think about that? And talk about crack versus powder cocaine.
Well, I'll take a crack at that. Powder cocaine is different from crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is very addictive. However, I don't agree that all of these drug issues are medical issues. They're not criminal issues. That's where I want to start. We're talking about non-violent offenders. I'm not talking about murderers, rapists, burglars, all of that. And what we're talking about in the Delaware Crime Prevention and Substance Abuse Act, it is addressed to non-violent offenders who are caught up in drugs and alcohol. They should be going to detox and rehabilitation. They have no business in the criminal justice system. Now, the act that we're trying to get passed, first of all, it ends mandatory sentencing. Judges hate them because they never know who's in front of them, whether they're mentally ill or what their backgrounds are. It will, a court order, there will be a drug court. You will go to the drug court, a judge will sentence you, court order you to a treatment program. You serve a year in your treatment program, you go into a sober living home where you pay rent and you have to have a job and all of that. After 3 years, if you've had no arrests, no run-ins with the law, you can have your records expunged. You will never have to carry a lifelong felony around with you, which prevents you from getting a job, going to school, having a life. So my remarks will be mostly related to the act, getting it passed. I have never seen an act more unanimously supported, an act before it even hit the legislature. The NAACP, the Green Party, Urban League, pastors, community groups, up and down this state, everybody is for the passage of the Delaware Crime Substance Abuse Act. Now we're waiting for the legislature to act.
We're going to get to that part, but let's talk about. I'm going to get to the act itself and who sponsored it and all that. I think it's a great thing. But talk about the crack versus powder cocaine and 3 strikes.
Well,
And I appreciate that, Liz. We're going to get to that one too. Go ahead.
thank you. While I certainly support and champion the overall need for treatment in the state of Delaware, and Liz and I have been allies and will continue to be allies in that battle, the crack versus powder cocaine impacted my ethnic group, black people, in an unfair and unconstitutional way. The theory was that crack cocaine had with it violence associated with drug dealing, while powder cocaine theoretically did not. And so judges were made or forced to sentence people differently. What ultimately happened is black folk or inner city drug offenders started getting sentenced more harshly than their white counterparts in the suburbs who may snort powder. And the little black man on the corner selling crack would get 15 to 50 to 20 years, while the guy with an equal amount of powder cocaine in the suburbs with a speedboat would get 2 years and treatment. And that was unconstitutional and unfair. I believe that we're on the right track because in Delaware, at least, both in the federal court system, and I believe it's happening in the state system, they're fixing that problem in terms of amending the law so that the same punishment. For years, Julius, we haven't played the game by the same set of rules. The same thing is happening right now with respect to prescription drugs, Percocet and Purple and these other prescription drugs. And so what you point out is significant, though, that the presidents who implemented these laws theoretically were supposed to be friends of the black community, while they implemented laws that came down unfairly and more heavily on the black community.
Charlie, what do you think about the 3 strikes, in life?
Well, I want to get back, say a little bit about the crack cocaine and versus the cocaine sentencing. I do believe that addicts are broke, so they're going to go after the cheaper drugs, and putting crack in the community, more addicts are going to use it, and they're flowing in our community. I think people are just trying to make ends meet by selling it, unaware that they're killing the community. The people that are using it, and sometimes I have to disagree, sometimes prison is a rescue, but it shouldn't be the only, I'm not going to say cure, it shouldn't be the only treatment that they can get is inside of a treatment facility. Crack has plagued our community for a long time. People aren't using cocaine because they can't afford it. So why not come in the black community and lock up our black sisters and brothers, for using or selling? That's where it's going to be at.
Okay. Another question I want, and I'm trying to get people some numbers. Okay, United States incarcerates 2,500,000 people in prison. We incarcerate more than anybody. We lock up more people in the world. United States does.
Free industrialized nation.
Yes. Also, in the last 30 years, it's been a 500 increase in prison in our community, and that's because of the Reagan administration. Also, I want to give these numbers out. In Delaware, we have between 6,500 and 7,000 inmates in prison. That's in Delaware. Also, we have 17,000 people on probation. Also, in Delaware, the taxpayers pay $36,000 per person.
Per year.
Per year in prison. And I remember one time where, when I was president before, we had a program that when people were at the plumber center, they would be able to come down to the port and work and been able to pay their fines and help them get out. And even though some of them didn't stay at the port, but they was able to do other things, and it was a big cushion for them. And when I lost the election, the program ceased. But I'd like to talk about these numbers and start with you.
Well, 85% of the people in prison are in there for drugs and alcohol. That's number one. 45% of the people in there are in there because they are mentally ill. What kind of a society are we that would put mentally ill people in isolation cells in a prison? It is unconscionable. Also, $36,000 a year is for a regular inmate. You've got people in there that are aging out, that are on dialysis. You're talking about $80,000 to $100,000 to keep one of these guys in there when they could be in a nursing home out here in the community for $3,000 or $4,000 a month.
Yeah, prison industry is big business, Julius. When you give those numbers, let's not leave out that Delaware has a $250 million budget for its prison system. Prison industry is big business. To the point that Shirley alluded to, though, and pointed out rightly, when a person's released from prison, when I was released from prison, you go to the plumber house. Your immediate obligations are to satisfy your costs and fines, to pay off your costs and fines to the court, any back child support, etc. So what am I going to choose? The illegal economy or the legal economy? If I choose the legal economy, even though I work, they're going to garnish my wages to satisfy my costs and fines, and then they're going to punish me for not having a paycheck. So I'm going to choose the illegal economy that they can't clock. So to Shirley's point, they're going to choose to sell drugs as opposed to the legal economy, because the legal economy is already checked for the ex-offender. And that's why what you did at the port, what you guys did then, and I believe why you were fought against so vigorously, was you were restoring people to the legal economy. And when you have that kind of leadership at the port, and that kind of leadership in other major industries like that, then you have an opportunity for people to be restored and never go back. Finally, the biggest area of failure in the prison system in the state of Delaware, as in the country, is in the Department of Probation. More people go back for probation violations than they do for committing new crimes. And we put more money into the probation department than any other department within the Department of Corrections. Something's wrong when you keep throwing money at a system that's not working, or either you really don't want it to work, you want it to generate money.
Exactly.
Okay, Shirley, go ahead.
So when we call it the Department of Correction, are we really correcting anything? You know, we do have some treatment going on in the prisons. I just wanted to say the prison that I work in is a program prison. Yes, inmates get paid. You have to either be working, going to school, or in a program, or getting a skill in that prison. They prepare you to come out of prison. In Delaware, it's almost like throwing you out of a plane and say, you know, safe landing, good luck.
Yep.
You know. They don't come out with any identification. They get their treatment in there, and then what happens when they come out? Who's really doing the follow-up as far as the treatment supervision? You know, I mean, we do have probation and parole officers or probation officers that are right there, and they're doing their job as far as supervision on the criminal aspect. But who is helping them get a job? Who is helping them to find housing? You don't look good on paper, because a lot of jobs you have to apply online. And on paper, you really don't look good when you're coming out of jail with a felony conviction. You don't even get a chance to talk about the felony conviction, because once you're sentenced, you're basically carrying that life sentence. Because wherever you go, you're going to have to put that down, regardless if you got a pardon. You still have to put that down. So you're really scarred coming out of prison, and we really need to be putting some things out there, like a reentry program, to help them re-enter society.
And the two major human needs for a human being, eating, Julius, and housing, those two, which are provided by government, Section 8, and food stamps, prohibited to a felon.
What we're gonna do, we're gonna come up with that, because again, and I want to thank some politicians who put the ban in the box, but I'm not gonna get to that yet. Who, I mean, started off with, I might as well go there now. Started off with 2012 with at the time, Mayor Jim Baker and Councilman Justin Wright, they put the thing in there for ban in the box. And what ban in the box means is this: when you go to apply for a job in that section, have you been convicted, or you don't have to answer that. You don't have to fill that out. I mean, that's not for policemen, firemen, in certain positions, certain jobs. And it was a great thing. And what happened is, sometimes this is a progression. It went, city council started it. Then J.J. Johnson, state representative J.J. Johnson, sponsored the bill for the state. And he had co-sponsors, Senator McDowell, Senator Margaret Henry, Valerie Longhurst, and others. And if I forget the name, forgive me. Now the governor, to his credit, is going to sign the bill in May. So again, it just goes to show you that good things are happening with some of these legislators. Now I'm going to get back to that, but I want to ask another question about solitary confinement, where they locking up prisoners, inmates, for 23 hours a day.
23 and a half hours a day.
Okay, 23 and a half hours a day. Can you imagine somebody locking you in a closet for 23 and a half hours a day? If you're not crazy, you will become crazy. And I talked to Shirley, and she said something that made totally sense, that if they're not doing life, they will be coming back into the community. I like to talk about solitary confinement.
Well, Delaware uses solitary confinement a lot. Guards will provoke a lot of the inmates into acting out so they can put them in solitary confinement. And we're not talking about a week or two, we're talking about months. This Ken Abraham, who's going to be going into federal court this week, he served 4 years in solitary confinement. Now, this was a former attorney, a deputy attorney general here in Delaware. 4 years in solitary confinement. It's the tiniest little box. I mean, you feel like you're in a grave, is what I'm being told. But also, there are some states. New York is trying to do something to end solitary confinement, because actually the psychologists and psychiatrists have found that the brain begins to collapse after 4 or 5 days living like that. So there's nothing rehabilitation about putting someone in solitary confinement. In fact, it causes more trauma, more mental stress. You're worse than you came when you get out than you were when you went in.
Pastor D.
I spent 3.5 years of my life in cell 17 on North Wing, maximum security, which you're referring to as solitary confinement, and we call the Hole. I spent 23.5 hours a day in the same cell. Shirley and others petitioned the state for my release. At that time, I held the record for the number of days that a person can spend. It's unlawful for a person, illegal currently, to be in solitary over 15 days. So what they do is, if they give you a sentence to solitary that extends past 15 days, they take you out, give you a psychological evaluation at the end of 15 days. If the psychologist says you're okay to go back in, you go back in solitary, do your next 15 days, and so on. I spent 3.5 years doing just that. Within that period of time, cut my wrists. I tried to hang myself. During that period of time, I experienced a busted gallbladder and practically died in the prison, was rushed out to the Riverside Hospital then. Eventually, I wrote a book in solitary confinement. And so I had my spiritual awakening there. Now, I'm not going to say that solitary is not necessary in prison. There are men who have been raped and other men who have exhibited behavior, Julius, who are dangerous inside, who need to either be protected or people need to be protected from, that end up in solitary. I went there for stabbing guards. I went there for doing other things in the institution, but it was the most horrific experience, and you do kind of lose your mental equilibrium if you're fortunate to come out of there with all your mental faculties, that is solitary, in place. It will make you a stronger individual, but there are behaviors that I have to this day that I pray God is continuing to help me to overcome because of solitaries.
Shirley.
I just want to say it just should not be abused. That's all.
Okay. Also, and now we want to talk about, again, things and programs in prison. I know they have the KEY program and different programs, but I want to read some statistics. And I want to tell a little story about when I worked for the governor, Ruth Ann Minner. and I was a liaison. Okay, here it says here, okay, people who get a degree in jail are 43% not to do recidivism, not to come back to prison in 3 years. People who don't get a degree, people who don't, I mean, I'm sorry, people in prison who don't get a degree are 43% likely to come back within 3 years. People who get a degree in prison are only 2% likely to come back to prison. But when I was working with Ruth Ann Minner, I was a community liaison, so I had to go to meetings, to the civic associations and different things. I was surprised and shocked that black folks were saying that, why should I pay a prisoner to go to college to get a degree when my son, I got to pay for my son, why should I have to pay for him to get a free college education? And that's why it was killed through Ruth Ann Minner, but it was the community, and it wasn't white folks, it was the African American community. They came out and they raised their voice. And Shirley, I know you did a lot with Key Program. I want to go to you first.
Well, for me, I would rather have them come out educated or trained, because they're going to come to a neighborhood near you. So I'd rather have them trained or schooled or something. Something has to go on with them while they're in prison other than warehousing them. You warehouse them, either they're going to come out worse, or, you know, they're going to come out the same way they went in. So I think that educating them, giving them some kind of trade that they can use when they get out in the street. You know, what Pastor D was saying, that, you know, selling drugs versus getting a job, a lot of times the doors are closed in their face. Mm-hmm. You know, once you say you've been in jail or you've been in prison, you know, people don't want to hire you. It's hard for these guys to find jobs. And we assume that these guys come out, they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. That's not their mental capacity. We think because they do well in jail, yeah, that's in jail. That's in a controlled environment. And then once they come out here, they're lost. Mm-hmm. They need someone to help them.
Well, let's look at what we get. I'm a product of the Key. I was the model that General McCaffrey came here to interview. I was the last inmate in America interviewed by Peter Jennings as a successful participant in treatment in jail. So I guess in a sense I'm the poster boy for what you get. Let's look at what we get. As opposed to me coming home, I had 1 murder, 5 robbery, and 5 kidnap. As opposed to coming home and recidivating, hurting somebody else or robbing somebody else. I directed the program at the Plummer House for 3 years, and first 3 years after my incarceration. I designed and gave the idea to the Hope Commission for the Reentry Center over on Vanderveer Avenue. I founded a church in the city of Wilmington. This is the result of your money that educated me while I was in the Key program. I went to Bible college while I was in the Key under the direction of Cornell Brunson. Went to Delaware State and University of Delaware while I was in the Key. So the money that you spent while I was incarcerated has produced a person that ran for mayor rather than a person that ran from the police the 3rd year of his release. I think you got to look at the outcome and what you get, the benefits, as opposed to the consequences. And people out there have to ask themselves what they want. Here's a better question, Julius. The Key program is now in 1,600 prisons in America. During the time that Shirley was a counselor and I was an inmate participant, we had people that we trained came from Germany and Australia. We trained their counselors. The program in Texas is modeled after the Key. We were the #1 treatment program in a prison system for success of people not coming back to prison. Why did we change it? Why did we take out the inmate participation, the NAAA and recovery trained people, and put in college trained students and other people who could not succeed as we did? We need to go back to the original blueprint, restructure the Key the way it was originally intended to work and did work, and we will get the results that we got before.
Liz Allen, I want to ask you something that's dear to your heart, but before I go there, I want to say about the Key program. I have a great friend of mine, and I call him my little brother, Dougie Pettifor, who worked for the prison. Dougie was like the 8 Golden Glove champ. I mean, this guy, you could be right in front of him and you couldn't hit him, bob and weave.
Because his head was so big.
You know, but Dougie, he was like my little brother and taught me a lot. And I won the Golden Gloves. One year we had 10 guys out of 20, and we won the regional Golden Gloves in Philly, New Jersey. And I just want to let Dougie know how much I love him, and I think he's doing an excellent job. And again, he's coaching the boxing team of West Center City. And he's just a good brother, and I just wanted to say that.
And
wait a minute, hold on.
Julius, he's the director of the Key program. He was my peer.
That's
he's the
why,
chairman of my
right.
deacons.
That's why.
So look at what you get.
That's why I'm saying that, because again, I remember Dougie, and
Yeah.
you know, when I first started boxing, and I was boxing. I came into boxing late, as far as boxers. I was like 18, 19. Dougie and I was boxing since they were 7. They whooped me bad when I came. It took me a while.
Is that what he went to jail for, whooping you?
No, Dougie, again, he's an awesome,
Yeah.
and love him to death, and I love the things he's giving back to the community. But Liz, this is something that's close to your heart, is mental health and having counseling in the prisons. What can you say about the mental health, where people have mental issues really shouldn't even be there? I want you to address that.
Well, we have probably 1,000 letters now, stacks and stacks of letters, that we've actually turned over to ABC News in Philadelphia, because we can't find anybody in Delaware willing to even look at them. But in those letters are from inmates who have witnessed the mentally ill. They are not getting any treatment. They're running out of medications in the medical unit of the hospital. So they're left in their cells, in these isolation cells, to scream their heads off all day. We do not need the mentally ill in these places. They need to be in mental hospitals where they can get the treatment and the counseling and the encouragement and get back to their families.
1 second, Liz. I want to say this. I used to work at the state hospital in high school. I got out of high school, and before, matter of fact, back then, the state hospital, they would offer money for patients to come. They cut that budget.
Yes.
Now, instead of going to the state hospital, you're going to prison. Can
That's
you talk
right.
about that? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's true. In fact, Josie Roy was a counselor at the Delaware State Hospital when they cut that program, as they did programs all over the place that had to do with mental health. So at some point or other, I don't know whose brilliant idea it was not to let them go into the hospital anymore. Which then the mentally ill. I mean, I know a fellow that was homeless and mentally ill, stole a sandwich. He got a year in prison. I mean, this is absurd. It is criminal. We cannot tolerate this anymore. We have got to expose it. That's what we're going to try to do.
But you can't.
But do you think
focus.
it's the police? Because I was watching the program today where the guy who killed these people in the college, the police went and interviewed him and everything, and now in some states they're trying to train the police officers to deal with mental illness.
My
They
point.
should.
And they put more burden on the police officers, but
It should
'cause
be
they
part
gotta
of their
make-
training.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a kid with autism who can't speak. My fear is that the kid is going to get outside in the street and a policeman's going to say something to him. He won't respond, and they'll beat him up or take him in. Or it's a fear that all parents with mentally ill or mentally challenged children have.
You can't start to focus on mental health at the point that a person's going to trial for blowing somebody's head off.
Right.
80% of the crimes that's being done by young people in the streets now with these guns and what have you is not the result of them being killers. It's the result of them popping pills, perk, blue, and what have you, and the mental health associated with it.
Right.
That's just a hard reality. And as long as we keep diagnosing the problem as pure crime, we're going to miss it. It needs to begin in juvenile detention. It needs to begin on the front side of bad behavior in school. And we need to get in these homes and provide the mental health services for the children while they are young, before they grow up and kill some. Because at the point that they've killed somebody, nobody's interested in helping them with their mental disease.
We need the nurses in our schools. We need more nurses in the schools, more psychologists in the schools, diagnosing these kids at a younger age and getting them into special ed or whatever kind of treatment that they need at a young age. But we're just passing them through, and then they go into adult. It's a school to prison.
Go ahead, Shirley, because I have a few more questions, then we're going to go to the phone. So go ahead, Shirley.
Yeah, but if the bottom line is, if they're already in prison, then you're going to have to treat them while they're in prison, and maybe being as though they're being sent to prison, they have nowhere else to put them. why not open up a pod for the dual diagnosed?
Exactly.
Yeah, but don't abuse
We
them,
have
Shirley.
them. We
They,
have
you
them.
know what
Yeah,
they
some of
did?
those.
I
when
mean, in prison.
When I
Yes.
stabbed somebody in prison, they put me on Thorazine. You know what they did after that? The psychological evaluation. In other words, you become a guinea pig in the prison system. There has to be the political and moral will to do the right thing. We have to be humane. We have to care. It has to be criminal justice, not criminal just us.
I want y'all to answer this question too. When people go to prison, there's a cost to the families outside
Is there
of
ever?
the prison.
Sure
That
there
a lot of
is.
these people, I know me personally, that I'm surviving just to pay my bills like most of us. I think one of the inmates was one of the highest in the country. I think was $17 for 15 minutes. $17 for 15 minutes. We're not talking about the food and everything. And this burden goes back on the family. I'd like y'all to discuss that. And wait a minute, the number I want you to call in is 661-4468. Because I think the machine is broke for the phone number. 661-4468. Go ahead.
If your family puts money in an account for you in the state of Delaware, the state of Delaware takes a fee for your putting that money in there. So
Say that again, Liz.
I'm going to say that again. If your family puts money in your account so that you can buy something at the commissary or a pack of cigarettes or whatever it is you want, the state will take a fee out of that account for handling your account. Also, the phone system, it's tremendous. It's $2 or $3 for a minute, and the guys say that they are shut off within, they're talking, and all of a sudden the phone shuts down. You go to buy, you have to buy tennis shoes. You'll buy a $20 pair of tennis shoes, but in prison it costs you $100.
Everything is
Jacked up to the point that
Yeah.
I pity the guys in there that have no family sending them any money.
Yeah,
Because
well,
they're not getting any
everything is-
commissary.
Let me say this
Jacked
because
up.
I want to thank one person about this bill. Then we got to go to the phone because their phones are blowing up. And Delaware.
but let me
hold
speak
on,
from
wait a minute.
experience about
Okay,
that
okay, but I want to
cost.
get to the phone. I want to get to the phone calls. Hold on for a second. I got you. I wanted to say Delaware Crime and Rehabilitation Act (HB), and thank Charles Potter for it. It's 343. That's the bill that it's for treatment, rehabilitation, and for mental illness and substance abuse. And Liz, you can say something about
There's
that.
going to be two bills. There's
And
going to
again,
be
thank you again,
Charles's
State
bill, and
Representative
then there's
Charles
going to
Potter.
be another bill done by Harris McDowell, which is the original bill that Dr. Floyd McDowell wrote that has
Senator
been
McDowell.
unanimously endorsed up and down the state. Potter's bill is about 25% of the act.
Okay. I'm going to take some calls again. I got some more questions. Charlie, you want to say something?
I'd like to
Go
finish
ahead,
what
go
I was
ahead.
saying about
Okay.
the cost. One of the things that happens, much of like what's happening, folk don't talk to us, they talk about us. And I consider myself one of those who survived what most of your sons and daughters will not survive. My middle son got kicked out of school, was 15 years when I came home from prison. He grew up most of his life without a dad in his life, and he had problems. By the grace of God, I was able to get him to live with me, raise him, went to Parent up on Parent Inc. up on Philadelphia Pike, learned how to be a parent, and was able to raise him and provide the fatherhood. That's one of the costs. The financial costs, no family can bear it. At some point, they got to stop the collect calls. They got to stop with the visits.
Hold on for a
And
second.
they got to stop sending money orders. Everything in prison is jacked up. The cost of everything, it is highway robbery, and I'm sure at some level illegal. And the
destroying
vendors,
families.
and there are monopolies on the vendors, from who sells the oodles and noodles to who gets the money for a $200 TV that costs $59 in the street. There ought to be an overall investigation about prison
Let's take this question, and
cost
we'll come back to you
itself.
because I got some more questions. I want to take a couple calls. Go ahead. You on the air?
Hello, my name is Jerome Saunders. I want
Hey,
to talk
Jerome.
about a political prisoner that was, has been incarcerated back, I guess, in the 60s, early 70s. Tyre has been locked up for a long, long time.
Yes, sir.
Better known as Ronald Payne.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, what is the problem? Why hasn't he been released? And what exactly is going on with Tyre, and I know for a fact that Shirley and the Reverend knows exactly who he is, and I know Julius knows who he is also. So, if you can elaborate on, what's really going on with Tyre and why haven't they released him, and what is the problem? Because this brother went to jail when he was 15 years old. He was with the Smyrna 7, and everybody's been out and back in and out again, and he hasn't been released yet. So could somebody, say something about that, and I'll hang up and listen.
All right, thank you, Jerome. Always good hearing from you.
The short answer to your question, Brother Jerome, is called state-sponsored revenge. I was in maximum security with Tyre for over 6 years. Frat, Tyre, Naeem, the Smyrna 5, I was the baby boy 6 of the Smyrna 5. The only reason they are still incarcerated, Ed Fountain, Tyre, and others, is because in the 60s during the Panther era, hostages were taken at Smyrna, the National Guard surrounded the prison, and Tyre was considered our leader. He is paying the cost of having been a revolutionary-minded inmate back then. And the revenge is sponsored by the state. I believe that it will take federal intervention for Frat Tyre, Emmanuel Redden, Soko from Riverside, and others who were feared by the prison system, who are now being punished for their acts years and years ago. The unfairness is, you're right. I came home, Naeem came home. When they emptied maximum security, there were 7 of us left in the building. 4 of us have been allowed to be free and be released. Because they never capitulated, never made statements against other inmates, and never broke down, so to speak, and they could never be broken, they are now being punished some
Shirley.
25 years later
Shirley.
for things that happened 25 years ago.
Shirley, you got something?
No, I'm
Okay.
not aware.
I want
why.
to take this call, but there's one question I do want to ask you, Pastor. It's going
railroad job. I
it's
was
going to be about the medical examiner's office, but I want to take a couple more calls to get some people, let them talk a little bit. I'm sorry, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to address Pastor D.
Okay.
Yes,
Go ahead. You're on the air.
yes, I have a son that's been locked up now since July of last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening.
And I've actually been able to get in touch with Brendan O'Neill, Ray Armstrong, and he is one of the ones that the medical examiner's evidence has been tainted. And what has made it difficult for me is that I have spent dollars on dollars trying to fight the system, put money on his books. They take out the money machine. Now you're sending money orders. My son is to be sentenced on Friday. And I do understand that at some point in time, there should have been something entered in when my son was notified that his case has been tampered with for dismissal. And I'm just trying to figure out why it is that some people get dismissed, some get probation, some commit the same exact crime with more evidence built up on them, and nothing gets done. Ray Armstrong has not returned any calls. Brendan O'Neill has pacified me, and I'm really concerned that my son's going to be one of the ones with the mental problems, the decision to want to commit suicide. He's young. He has 3 children, and I'm actually the caregiver of one of his children. And I really need answers as to what do I do before Friday, May 30th, to save my son.
Okay, let me answer the question. But okay, thank you. Hold on for a minute, Pastor, before you answer. I want to explain to everybody about the medical examiner. What she's talking about was they had a trial. The lawyer asked the state police. He opened up a bag of what he thought was Oxycontin, and he asked the police, "Is this the evidence?" The state trooper looked inside and said, "No, that wasn't the evidence." Instead of having, I think, the 60 pills of Oxycontin, there's with 13 blood pressure pills. And then investigated, things started, and they found that a lot of evidence was tampered with. Okay, so that was just wanted the viewing audience to understand what she's talking about.
Now there are thousands of cases being held up and guys sitting in jail waiting for the state police to figure out what happened to the evidence. But
Well,
I want to say something about
I don't
this.
think-
Hold up, wait a minute, let her answer, then we'll go to you, Pastor.
First
I
of
thought
all,
she asked me the question.
the Senate had a hearing on the medical examiner's office. They never invited one person from the medical examiner's office that could go in there and testify as to what they knew. Not one. Number two, Rita Landgraf, who is the Department of Health and Social Services, has never stepped foot in the medical examiner's office. I have it on excellent response from someone who works there that they have been asking for calibration equipment, all kinds of equipment for years and years and years, and they were turned down. Now we're going to spend millions of dollars on a new crime lab. Ridiculous.
Pastor Z, go ahead.
Ma'am, I know you're worried about your son, and I don't want to waste your time. I can only assume you directed the question to me because you're aware of the fact that I led a march downtown, and I presented a list to the Attorney General's office prior to Brendan O'Neill and the Public Defender's office to demonstrate what should happen. Two reasons why your son has not received the letter. Some people are receiving a letter saying the evidence in your case has been tainted or is missing and the charges against you has been dropped. Your son, if he's one of those cases, has been denied equal protection of the law and will be denied due process. If he has a sentencing date, you said Friday coming up, it would be a miscarriage of justice for them to sentence him for evidence that they don't have. If he took a plea bargain, and I suspect he did, that means that they are concluding, well, he knew he had the dope, whether we got it or not, or he wouldn't have pled to it. That then suggests that you need a private paid attorney, because the difference between him and somebody that's going to get released, whether they signed a plea agreement or not, is the caliber of the attorney and the zealousness with which they represent him. I advise you to call Brendan O'Neill back and tell him, I want your office, since your office should have revealed to my son through a preponderance of the evidence that the drugs were not there that they said they had, then I expect you to take responsibility for ineffective assistance of counsel, and I expect you to file a motion that the charges of my son, against my son, be dropped, just like those who have private and paid attorneys. You can call my office at the church, and any advice and counsel I can give you on the matter, I will. I'm not an attorney, I'm an advocate, but every pastor, every civil rights leader, and the NAACP ought to be involved in this.
Hold on for a second.
And if there was a plea deal involved, that plea deal could have been intimidated.
Okay. Also, I don't know if they're looking, you might want to find a lawyer there who's looking to do a class action lawsuit.
Yes.
And
yes.
because you do better with numbers. And again, so I'm sorry, you're on the air. Go ahead.
All right, I want to just ask a question that I haven't heard anybody say anything. No one said anything about Markell or Joe Biden, Beau Biden, the Attorney General's office, and no one's laying none of this blame at their feet. And it's kind of political that no one wants to.
Calvin, go ahead. What's the question?
Man, you can't let me answer a question.
I'm trying to get calls, Calvin. Go ahead, answer your question. Ask the question, Calvin.
Why haven't you said anything about the people responsible for the medical examiner's office being so sloppy? And you can't tell me the Attorney General's office don't have a clue about why these people are being sent to jail anyway.
But that's why we have callers, so what we don't ask, y'all can ask. Okay, let them answer the question. Thank you.
Calvin, I share your thought that heads ought to roll, and not just at the medical examiner level. There has been, and Julius hit it on the head when he said class action. A gross
hold on for a second.
number
We'll get to your
of people have been violated. Their constitutional rights have been violated, and attorneys who represent them obviously did not check the Rule 16s to make sure the state had this, what they said they had, before they went back and convinced their clients to take plea agreements. So the Office of Professional Standard and Disciplinary Counsel should be in.
Go ahead.
So everybody, all hands on deck. Governor Markell should be demanded to take a position, make a statement, and fire somebody in that AG's office for the dereliction of duty that's been displayed.
You're on the air. Ask a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask about transitional care. When a person has served their time and they're released from prison, When do they get their driver's license in the state of Delaware, and when can they register to vote?
Okay, I'm gonna send that to Shirley. Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, Shirley, go ahead.
I'm not familiar with Delaware, but
I
I
am.
just believe that they should be able to take care of all that before they come out.
Now,
Why
what-
aren't they coming out with
Now,
an
you say
ID?
you at a place where they do all that.
Before you come out, you have your
Okay.
Social Security card. You have taken care of everything that has to do with your license. You have your birth certificate and an ID when you walk out of the prison. I don't
is not
understand
true
why
in Delaware.
Delaware can't do the same
Not
thing.
true in Delaware. You don't have any of that in
May,
Delaware.
may I answer her question?
Well, let me just run the show, please. Go ahead. I'm trying to
don't
get to
wanna run
every.
the show. I
I'm
want-
trying to get to everybody. Okay.
But
Go
I
ahead.
can answer her
okay,
question.
No, but okay.
I
I'm
vote.
gonna come to you. Okay. I'm trying to get to everybody. All right. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, in Delaware, I'd like to know why they take your driver's license in the first place, but you do not have any of that. When you go through probation and parole, nobody even asks these questions. Nobody asks, where are you going to be living when you leave here? Nothing has been arranged for you at the probation end of it, which is one of the major problems. You got $50 in your pocket, if you're lucky, when you leave the prison, and sometimes they put you out in the middle of the night. You got to figure out how you're going to get home. Do you have a home? Where am I going to? These are the lapses in services that are non-existent in Delaware, which have to be fixed.
Okay, go ahead, Pastor.
Listen, first of all, let me apologize. There are thousands of formerly incarcerated people who are watching this program right now who know that I know answers to these questions, and I apologize to you for sitting here like a dummy and not being able to. But listen to me. Ma'am, the answer to your question. Delaware Code Title 16, the drug laws come under Delaware Title 16. If the person's license was taken under Delaware 16, then the court that revoked their license has to be involved in the restoration of their driving privileges. So as to your question about when can they get their license back, that judge, that court has already placed it within the sentencing. Get a copy of their sentencing order. As to restorative care and when they can vote, some years ago, House Bill 126 was passed, which restores our right to vote 5 years after completion of all of our sentences. That means probation, pay off all costs and fines. That's why I ran for mayor, to expand and extend that and force that to go through. It did go through. Any ex-offender that's been out 5 years, hasn't had a new offense in Delaware, has paid all their costs and fines, can vote.
Okay. Again, Shirley, go ahead.
I had a program called the ROAD program, Release Offenders Assistance Program, and 6 months prior to release, I would meet with the incarcerated individual, female and male, and made sure before they got out that they had housing, identification, you know, and the different things that they were going to need coming home, and I supervised them up to a year. Any problems that they had, we worked it out. We had 2 probation officers that were assigned to us. And that's what we need back in the community now. It's really sad that these guys are coming out, and the females are coming out. But the women, they have more than the guys do, because they can get a Section 8 and they can get TANF and different things like that. But the guys can really, you know, they may give them some food stamps. Okay. So we really need some kind of reentry and some kind of system program for these guys coming out.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions, again, and excuse me, because like I said, we got a good panel here. We got questions. We're trying to shorten up. We got phone calls, so we got a lot of things happening about the parole when people being violated. And I want y'all to understand, everybody, it's not just black people. Again, we have a young man on my job who's white. He was on probation. He was paying his fine. He was working overtime. He was doing everything. A parole officer violated him and went to court to try to send him back to prison. The judge said, for what? He's paying his bills. He's paying his debt. He's paying $200 a week, and thank God for the judge. And again, this ain't all black people, so this is across the board. And can y'all just talk about the probation of people being violated and different things? We run. Time is running too, so we got to shorten the answers up because again, the phone call. We got 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, Julius.
This is Josie. How are you?
How you doing, Josie?
Hi, Pastor D, Liz,
Hi,
and
Josie.
the other guests there. I just wanted to say to Liz and Pastor D, I thought this would be public notice, and I thought it would be in the newspaper, but there are no longer the kiosk machines being at the Howard R. Young. As of April 25th, those kiosk machines were stopped. You can now send money orders and a cashier's check to your loved ones. As far as the phone is concerned, you have to have a major credit card, MasterCard or Visa, in order to, have phone contact with your loved ones. So I just want you to know, I don't know why it was not public notice, but those kiosk machines are done.
Oh, good.
So I just want you to know that. And Pastor D, you can comment on it because you
Yeah,
know
that was
I
due
want
to
them
your work,
try,
Josie. Yeah, due to your
make
work.
Sure
You
that
caught
things
it.
were taken care of.
Yeah, you caught it
Thank you.
early before
you, Josie.
it spread to
All right.
other parts of the state. But let me digress to the lady's question about probation. The hardest thing to do in the state of Delaware is to successfully complete probation. What I would suggest to every ex-offender, I tell them, do what you did in prison. If you had a visit coming on Friday and you didn't want to get your privileges taken, you locked in your cell early. 10 minutes before count time, you locked your own cell door. If you got a curfew on level 3 probation and it says be in by 10, be in by 9:30, be in by 9:15. Do exactly what you did in prison. If you went off limits in prison, you got a write-up. Don't go in a part of town that's a known drug area. If you want to successfully complete probation, you had idiot guards in prison. They talked to you any kind of way. You ignored them and you did what you had to do to get out of jail. Do the same thing with your probation officers. As soon as they flow you down, file for your expunge and file for your pardon. I have an executive pardon. You can have one too, but you gotta do the same thing you did to get
I
out.
appreciate it. We have a minute left, and what I want to do again, this show probably should have been 2 hours because there's a lot. So in trying to move it again, especially with this very strong panel, I'm gonna give everybody 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna close out. 30 seconds, Liz.
Okay, there's been two guys that have been what I call homicide murdered in prison. One is Jamie Cunningham. One is an alcoholic guy from Sussex County. The medical examiner has already determined he was homicided by guards. We are waiting for Jamie Cunningham's case to come up, but there are inmates who witnessed the murder. Now let's see
30
if we get any justice with that.
Okay, Pastor D, 30
Green eggs
seconds.
and ham Sam in Sussex County. Don't think we forgot you, buddy. You're about to be sterlingized by a group of ex-offenders. We're sponsoring a march in Sussex County. You should be ashamed of yourself, Green Eggs and Ham Sam. You know who you are. Apologize. If Mr. Sterling apologized and lost his position in the NBA, you should lose your position on the county seat. I know it doesn't have to do with prison, but it does have to do with the African-American children you disrespected and the NAACP
30 seconds.
you insulted.
30 seconds.
I think they're spending too much money on incarcerating people when we need a reentry program out here that would cost half the money, if not a fourth of the money. And I think we should put our funding in that, maybe allocate some of that money going to these different programs that aren't making a difference, and maybe funding some of these grassroots programs.
Also, I would again like to thank Mayor Baker, Justin Wright for banning in the box, JJ, thank you. Thank Senator McDowell and everybody else who's on that. Also, again, the Port of Wilmington, we're trying to create jobs. We got great things ready to happen. Senator Marshall, Valerie Longhurst, if it wasn't for these two people, the port wouldn't be where it's at today. We're going to talk about that later on. But again, thank everybody, and we hope we can have another show. This was excellent with an excellent panel. They didn't beat me up too bad, but again, and Dougie, I love you, Golden Glove champ. That's it. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.